Well, good morning and thank you all for joining us for this very special webinar with the Honourable Jaclyn Symes, the Minister for Regional Development, Minister for Agriculture and Minister for Resources. I'm Paul Guerra, the Chief Executive of the Victorian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and together with our Deputy President, ADRIAN, it's my great pleasure to welcome you today. We are holding today's webinar in conjunction with Small Business Victoria, and the aim of these webinars is to help you, our members and guests, with information on how you can manage the COVID-19 crisis in your business, and also hear some wonderful insights from those making the decisions that will not only keep us safe, but importantly, how we get back to work. Today, we are delighted to hear from Minister Jaclyn Symes, who has responsibility for particularly regional Victoria and will play a huge role in our states recovering out of this crisis. Don't forget, you can go to www.business.vic.gov.au to access advice and business grants available from the state government. And of course, for access to the Victorian Chamber's business advice and assistance and sign up for our free membership offer, go to www.victorianchamber.com.au. For those of you that haven't, please help us all get back to business sooner by downloading the COVIDSAFE app, and now might be a good time to do that. Let's get into today's webinar featuring Minister Jaclyn Symes. Jaclyn was elected as a member for Northern Victoria in 2014, and in December 2018 became responsible for Regional Victoria, Agriculture and the Resources portfolios. Jaclyn is a passionate advocate from Regional Victoria, the agriculture sector, and works tirelessly to manage the resources portfolio, which in recent years covered the now lifted moratorium on onshore conventional gas exploration. I know many of our regional members have registered today to hear directly about how we can allow businesses to start to reopen. I was fortunate enough to work closely with the Minister in my previous role, and I can tell you her energy and enthusiasm are infectious. Welcome, Minister. It's great to have you with us today.
It's wonderful to be here, Paul. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and you had a good weekend out and about in regional Victoria, I hear.
I got out just slightly. I would have loved to have been out a bit more, but I've got a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old and they had sniffles. So I had to tag team with the husband in between his golf and my attempts to at least hit one farmers market. So I did enjoy that, but I'm hearing fantastic reports from people who have been out and about in country Victoria this long weekend.
Fabulous. I thought what we might do is perhaps give an overview from your perspective across the whole portfolio. And then what I might do from there is jump into some questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I've got a small address, so I'll launch into it, and very happy to have a conversation after that with your listeners, particularly those from regional Victoria. So of course, I would like to begin this morning by acknowledging the traditional owners from the land of which I'm joining you today, the Taunterong people, and I would like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Thank you for your introduction, Paul, and of course, good morning to everyone joining us from wherever they may be. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all today and thank the Chamber for the invitation and in particular the focus on regional Victoria. I'm certainly grateful that technology is allowing us to continue to connect in this way, depending on where you are most of the time. It is certainly fair to say that 2020 has proved to be both remarkable and memorable, but certainly caused much disruption, hurt, stress and heartache across the state. I don't know about those that are watching, but I've found this period quite surreal. Like almost everyone, my work days have been incredibly different. My average day starts with a shower, choosing which hoodie to put on, commuting down the hall to my home office to commence one of various Zoom meetings for the day. And obviously that's dispersed with breakfast, homeschooling, lunch, homeschooling, and the odd load of washing. But I've really enjoyed being busy with work, despite missing the best part of my job, which is travelling around country Victoria. Like today, I've really been able to talk to people from every corner of the state, hear how they're going, what they need, and importantly, their views on economic recovery. And it's that conversation that I'm hoping to have with you all today. I particularly want to talk about how regions are responding to the challenges, adapting to the way we do things, and what future opportunities are available. For many country communities, of course, coronavirus has come after extended periods of drought and devastating bushfires at the start of the year, and for some, long-term economic transition impacts. So, of course, the road to recovery is not going to be easy. I must say I've delighted in the countless stories from country communities about businesses managing, in particular, how locals have been supporting locals. So when we saw supermarket shelves stripped bare by panic buying, farmers were really quick to reassure us that there was plenty of high quality food on tables. And there's been a lot of online farmers market type platforms that have popped up to support producers, which have been pretty cool. The Moyu Hotel in particular has been serving almost 100 takeaway palmers on a Wednesday night, which is a pretty awesome effort. And we've been trying to tap into some of our purchasing power as a government to support businesses as well. I had Regional Development Victoria staff travelling around country towns buying lollies, toys, games, and even Easter eggs to provide the families that were returning from overseas and spending 14 days quarantine in Melbourne hotels. But of course, it's fair to say it's important to acknowledge that every business has not fared as well. But I'm cautiously optimistic that we'll be able to continue to lift restrictions and get the $80 billion regional economy going again. I think it's been vital to have both federal and state government to implement survival initiatives. JobKeeper has obviously been a lifeline to many workers and businesses, as too has rent reductions, payroll tax reimbursement, fee waivers and deferrals. Regional Development Victoria have played a really key role in supporting businesses to respond to the pandemic. Some examples have been working with local businesses to stock PPE equipment such as Medcon in Shepparton making face masks, working with breweries and distilleries who have pivoted to supply hand sanitizer, and of course working with other businesses from critical sectors to help them navigate some of the challenges around workforce, supply chains and market access. Importantly for you guys, we've been supporting small businesses across the state by providing $750,000 to the Chamber, AI Group and AHA, as well as 15 regional chambers to improve their communications with members regarding initiatives within the economic survival package. And I can't underestimate how important that is. A lot of people don't recognise that they're eligible for assistance until they ask. So your organisations are imperative to making sure that people are asking the right questions and accessing that help that is there, because there is money available and we certainly want it going out the door. I think I'm really optimistic that there is significant opportunity for regional Victorian communities and businesses to drive the economic recovery coming out of the pandemic. I've been encouraged by reflecting on the fact that regional Victoria went into the pandemic with the lowest regional unemployment rate in the country, and that's a good starting point to help the state get back on track. Of course, our regions are home to around 1 in 4 Victorians, and they account for 70,000 jobs and almost 40% of our small businesses. So a large part of that is driven by sectors that I think will be essential to our state's recovery, including ag, tourism and resources. I think tourism, I think a lot of people are pretty excited about the renaissance of domestic travel. I think it was about $80 billion spent on domestic travel in 1819. And obviously with restrictions on international travel for some time, or at least even a reluctance for people to be travelling overseas for some time, is going to mean that people are going to be looking for holidaying opportunities in their backyard. And I think Victoria's got some of the most amazing places to visit, whether you're into the outdoors, food and wine, historic towns or the like. I think there's lots of opportunities for us to really capitalise and make sure that that all important visitor dollar is going into the pockets of those regional communities. As I said, I didn't get out as much as I wanted to on the weekend. The Tallarook Farmers Market was very popular, I can say. That was good to see. But I certainly have heard reports across regional Vic that bakeries, pubs and cafes have been navigating their way around the restrictions to welcome hundreds of visitors. I received a message this morning from a local winery who described the weekend as a monster weekend. despite strictly observing the restrictions, they managed only 2.1% downturn on last year. And they were able to bring in locals to work, and they really reported that there was just a buzz amongst the visitors, a lot of positivity, but a really clear message that people were there to support them. And I think that's happening right across country Victoria, with people returning and spending money, really wanting to support those that have been hit hard, particularly those regions that have had the double and triple whammy with drought and fire. It's small businesses that I think will drive the economic recovery. As I've said, for every 100 small businesses, 25 of them are in beautiful regional Victoria. And I think a lot of your members will be aware of the support, but one of the initiatives that I'm particularly proud of is regional payroll support. On top of the reimbursements, we've had a policy of reducing regional payroll tax in country Victoria to be the lowest rate in Australia, and it will be reduced to 1.215% by 22-23, which is a real incentive for people to operate businesses in Victoria. So I'm always interested in attracting Melbourne businesses, or indeed interstate businesses, to country Victoria, or indeed helping new businesses set up to take advantage of those good tax offerings. I think Paul, you alluded to the opportunities for country Victoria leaning in on how we're responding to the changes and the working from home arrangements. I think people are really have adapted. Workplaces have been able to, a lot of workplaces have been able to accommodate people working from home with appropriate IT support and the like. But what it really has done is shine a light on the fact that for a lot of people, you do not need to be in Melbourne 5 days a week for your job. I can attest to the fact that I could quite easily be in Melbourne and fill my days with meetings, but living in Broadford, I try not to go into Melbourne too much, and I get to have the benefit of living in the country and being able to commute to Melbourne just on occasion. And I think I'm going to have to be able to do that a little bit less now that people are accustomed to Zoom and WebEx and Teams and all the different platforms now. So I think there'll be some really positive outcomes for people's work-life balance, and indeed the attractiveness of relocating to country Victoria. But on that, I think you don't just tell people, yeah, come and move to country Victoria, it's a great thing to do. I think people who are particularly relocating from the city, they expect quality services and community infrastructure. And so it's been really important as a government to put our money where our mouth is. And we had the recent $2.7 billion building works package, which is certainly a welcome start. There was 80 regional projects worth $620 million across every corner of the state. And those are investments in schools, roads, rail, tourism, entertainment projects, and housing activation. They were deliberately shovel-ready projects, so tier 2 and 3 projects, meaning local people being able to access construction jobs quickly, and indeed providing infrastructure for the long haul. Of course, that's kind of what Regional Development Victoria do as core business. So I'd say that the package complements our work. We're always very interested in working with local communities and local councils on the projects and infrastructure that is important to those communities. For example, in April, which I think was my last significant regional trip, I announced the first few projects to be funded through the Regional Infrastructure Fund, and that included a new streetscape at Timboon and a new community hub at Garvok, which was just delightful. The people, the LAC community was so grateful for that funding. A real community hub will be created there. And for those that are into mountain biking, there's some pretty cool trails that are going to be built in forest, all wonderful places for a weekend or longer. So in relation to probably some of the other efforts in relation to the government, what we've been doing, I don't think anyone would have missed the Working for Victoria program. It's been a fantastic support for lots of displaced workers, placing them into, I guess you could call them pandemic demand roles. So you would have seen, anyone in Melbourne would have seen blitzes of people cleaning and things like that. As part of that, and as my role as Minister for Agriculture, I secured $50 million from that program to specifically support the agricultural workforce plan. It's a plan that's designed to match displaced workers with vacant agricultural jobs. I guess in good news, it actually hasn't been taken up to the extent that we expected, for good reason. Many businesses have either not had the shortages that they anticipated, or they've been able to fill shortages locally. And of course, we did actually launch this plan prior to the federal government's JobKeeper and Job Seeker programs. So the number of displaced workers has been lower, which, as I say, is a good thing. But I am acutely aware that in the coming months, as these support packages wind back, we are likely to see more people looking for work. Agricultural stakeholders certainly do remain concerned about the lack of holiday and migrant visa workers, so it's important that we continue to monitor those types of impacts. I've had a stakeholder, agriculture industry stakeholder reference group, which brings together about 30 peak body industries for weekly catch-ups to talk about challenges of COVID, get health advice, and it's sort of now pivoting, I guess, to responding to the opportunities in the sector. As a result, we were able to provide some funding to ag workplaces where they might need to respond to the COVID restrictions and the like. So whether it's providing more appropriately distanced transport for workers, or extra washrooms, or accommodation changes, or workplace fit out so that they can ensure the health and safety of their workers, is something that has just rolled out, has been directly as a response of listening to industry. So that was a really good thing to announce last week. And we've also created new jobs with Catchment Management Authority, which will be advertised pretty soon for people to go into jobs that directly help the agricultural sector, predominantly like pest and weed management and the like. So some really important work that I'd be really excited for people to get into. Yes, my portfolio of resources is pretty cool, actually. Really amazing people. I've got to be frank, I didn't actually know that much about the portfolio when I was first asked to take it on. Actually, having said that, you don't actually get asked. You get told you're getting, and the Premier rang me the night. I already knew I was a minister, but then he rings you and tells you what portfolios you've got. And he says, "Oh, okay, so we're giving you agriculture." I'm like, "Yep, they're good." Regional development, I'm like, "Awesome, yep, all over that." And you go, "And resources." I'm like, "The rock one?" So yeah, the rock and gas one. Like, you'd be great. It's all about country Victoria jobs. And I've got to say, I'm really grateful that I was given that portfolio, because it really does intersect with the two other portfolios. It's all about regional communities, jobs, and as I said, it's a fantastic sector, passionate people. There's more than 120,000 workers in businesses, large and small, in this industry, many in regional communities. And I've got to say, I've been really impressed with their response to coronavirus. Representative bodies, they were really quick off the mark to get advice out to their workers and their employers about how to continually operate safely, what to do in the event of a health incident and the like. And they were also very quick to ask government or tell government what they needed in relation to support. So it was very pleasing to be able to respond to that. We have been able to defer the collection of rent and annual fees for mines, quarries and explorers until for the rest of the year. And it equates to around $3.5 million of revenue. So really helping boost cash flow and maintain local spending. And we're also providing leniency for licence conditions such as exploration expenditure to provide short-term relief for companies who need it. And I think I've had a lot of catch-ups over Zoom with the resources sector, and they're going to be absolutely vital when it comes to the economic recovery, particularly when we have a big focus on infrastructure recovery. Obviously, you can't build things without sand and rock. So they certainly deserve our support. We want to help them maintain the supply of critical materials and make sure that they're affordable for the sector to access. I think one of the good things they did report that they had record sales of garden stones and supplies and the like for a lot of those people in those ISO projects. So it was some pretty cool stories coming out of the resources sector as well. So look, I shouldn't probably keep going too much further. I'm happy to answer questions. I just probably wanted to relay that we're committed to as a government, that is, listening to the emerging challenges and what communities and businesses need. There's a lot of regional roundtables. I've got a lot of opportunities for people to have their say and have their views presented to government in relation to the response. And of course, I think with the questions today, I think, Paul, I'm more than happy to, the ones that we don't get to today, I'm more than happy to provide responses to later as well. I probably would just touch on one last thing, and that's just absolutely want to take the opportunity to say that we haven't forgotten about the bushfire communities. There are a lot of support there for bushfire communities, a lot of community groups getting together to make sure we're informing that response. And I think a good thing about the response to COVID and the bushfires is that it's broken down a couple of those silos that you can get within government departments. And if you ring government for support from a bushfire affected area, you can get advice on what's available both under the COVID response and under the bushfire response. So I'm wanting to get up to Northeast Victoria hopefully tomorrow or Friday just to see how some of those businesses are going. But yeah, the long weekend showed some optimistic turnaround, and as I said, I think that regional Victoria is going to lead the economic recovery out of this pandemic because we've got the right people there already showing us that they're up for the job. So thank you so much for the opportunity, Paul.
Let's pick it up from there because that's what we're hearing from our members as well, the strength of regional Victoria. You know, we talk about resilience and my mind goes straight to regional Victoria when I think resilience off the drought, then bushfires and now this. You've touched on the support that the state government has given, and again, I give a huge shout out to the people in your department and across all of government that have come off the back of bushfires, stood up a bunch of support straight into COVID, stood up a bunch of support as well. You've touched on the areas that have helped us to this point. You've also asked in terms of what's next and what regional Victorian members are seeing. I have no doubt the other part of regional Victoria, they're very frank with their input, which will be fabulous in terms of helping us work through where to go from there. There was an interesting question came in from Wayne on the chat, and it kind of picks up around some businesses in regional Victoria aren't as well equipped as what the CBD are to work from home, which also feeds into what you saw over the weekend and what we're hearing across the border as well. Is there a way we can get regional Victoria up and running before perhaps Melbourne CBD opens up again?
Yeah, look, I think it's a important conversation to have. Obviously, the National Cabinet process has been a fantastic process to consider the easing of restrictions and the orderly restart of businesses and the like. We certainly make all of our decisions based on the health experts, and of course that is something.
Oh, have we lost the minister there momentarily? I think we have. While we wait for the minister to come back.
Despite the fact that we're tracking well, we don't, sorry?
We lost you there for a short period, Minister, but you're back now.
Oh, yeah, I'm here, sorry. I think getting the public transport commute and the foyers and the big businesses in Melbourne and things like that, I can understand why we need to be overly cautious in relation to return to work for those places. But I think taking your point and hearing from regional Victoria, when you can operate your workplace with social distancing and the like, then that should be considered. The advice at this point in time remains, if you can work from home, you should work from home, and I think people are respecting that. But as we do start to ease restrictions, I think consideration of workplaces that don't involve large groups of people is something that is certainly something that we should give some thought to.
Yeah. I think the other thing you mentioned in your speech was around the ability to work remotely. And I think we've all learned a lesson through this period. And for the first time, we've seen, telecommunications, be that through the internet directly or through the cellular services, matched with applications like Zoom and the others. It's given us all a fresh perspective in terms of what's possible. What do you see in terms of regional Victoria? Is there an opportunity for more people to relocate out of the CBD or suburbia Melbourne into regional Victoria?
Yeah, well, look, I've been banging this drum for quite some time, actually. My view is that a lot of workplaces should consider whether they need their workers in Melbourne offices every day of the week. I know, for instance, we've been looking at Department of Jobs precincts and regions quite closely about some of those positions, and we've had some executive roles relocate from the CBD to our centres. The Director of Regional Development Victoria, for example, is headquartered in Ballarat, and we've got some directors in Wodonga and Geelong as well. And I'm more than happy to hear the case of any of the directors in the department who want to make the relocation to country Victoria. I think communications is a big deal, as you can tell. I just froze then, and I'm only in Broadford. But so there is a digital divide for many communities, and continue to work with the federal government in their responsibilities in ensuring that we've got the right infrastructure in place to enable that. Obviously, I hear a lot about country trains as well, and making sure that those that do need to get into Melbourne for work are able to do so without having to get in the car is another important factor for people considering moving to country Victoria. But I have no doubt that off the back of COVID, there'll be a lot of people looking for opportunities to relocate and change their work practices so that they can have a country city lifestyle.
So does that help you rethink the future of regional Victoria? And then in terms of what additional services, you've touched on a couple there, and perhaps more investment to get more jobs into the region? Yeah,
look, I think that's right. Like I grew up in country Victoria, but then lived in Melbourne for quite some time. But relocating back to country Victoria, I'm from Benalla, I wasn't moving back to Benalla. We were looking for somewhere a little bit closer in because I dragged my Melbourne husband out, frankly. But what we looked for was road, rail, schools, hospitals, and number one thing for us at the time was childcare. So one of the I think childcare provision in country Victoria is one of the factors that holds back a lot of people moving out, and I think that's something that I've been proud to introduce childcare for the first time into a few towns since being in government, Chiltern and Heathcote, to name a couple. But there are certain things that people need in order to balance their work and family life, and we need to make sure we're making those investments.
Yeah. One of the key parts of your portfolio is around agribusiness. I would think our reputation as a clean and green site has not only been reinforced through this, but I think has highlighted through this as well. How does that help us position against other international competition?
Look, I think we have a fantastic reputation for producing some of the most high quality produce in the world. I think that it will only intensify. I think off the back of COVID, we've thankfully when we've had a bad year, a lot of the agriculture sector having a bumper year. The weather's been good. Horticulture industry in particular are really gearing up for one of the best seasons they've had in a long time. And of course, we produce way more food than we need to feed ourselves here in Victoria and indeed Australia. So it's really important to help facilitate market access to all parts of the world for our exporters. And I think some lessons out of the pandemic as well is that we've actually really had to be creative working with Global Victoria and the like to access markets and ways to access markets because of the decline in passenger planes, for example. So it's actually really sharpened the focus on market access offerings. But I think probably the other local benefit from how good our produce is that there's been a real I know probably an awakening of where your food comes from and who our producers are. When we saw the shelves being emptied and people were concerned about whether they're going to be able to feed their families, the farmers really stepped up and said, it's okay, we're here for you. And a lot of people stepped in and had the virtual platforms for people to access local produce and the like. And I think more people are eating local produce than ever before as a result of really been looking for those markets and being able to find them because people have facilitated those activities. We've got a Victorian country market platform that we launched as a government, which is proving to be pretty successful as well. And we're helping to pay for the freight costs and like, so that people can get online and order, some fresh produce from Victoria. And I think people, you don't go back to your packet stuff after you've started receiving that.
Yeah, tourism, and you touched on that in your opening. Certainly that was the biggest smile on my face over the weekend, was seeing some of the tourism operators being able to welcome people back into it. We're lucky right now because I think we do have the greatest state in the greatest country in the world, and we've pretty much got it all to ourselves. So there's no better time to go and explore Victoria. As you know, I love the Murray region a lot, particularly through the summer period. As you get out and about, you're going to hear more from the tourism operators that, off the back of a little bit of drought, but certainly bushfire and now this, they will need additional support. I know you're aware of that, as is the Minister for Tourism. What are you expecting to see, and what additional support are you thinking through at the moment?
Yeah, look, I think this is an industry that's just been smacked. This is probably the hardest hit industry as a hit by the pandemic, but also a lot of the regions hit by bushfire. It hasn't been a great 2020 at all. So we've got some dedicated support there's the Experience Economy package. There's been money through Parks Victoria into campgrounds and things like that. There's the Building Works package for the tourism sector, including upgrades, maintenance, and new experience for tourism destinations across the state. I think a lot's already there. It really is. It's just a matter of making sure that we are improving what's there, making it more accessible. I know a lot of bike riders out there, so making sure that our trails are up to speed and creating new trails, a lot of walks. But really, I think promoting the food and wine industry is a particular focus. I think a lot of people like to go, and I think we've just had a conversation about how good our produce is. A lot of people are happy to travel for that produce, or go for a ride on the bike and then finish with a wine at night. I think it's there. People that are no longer looking for their overseas trip will start to have a look about what's available. So I think it's important that we've got the right communications and the right campaigns in place. And I know Visit Victoria will be developing up some holidaying local campaigns and the like. And also, importantly, both Marty Pakula and I had been working on the regional tourism review, which was basically almost complete as we were hit with the pandemic. So we're just reworking that up as a sharper focus, as a recovery tool as well. So we are, both Marty and I, are pretty passionate about regional Victoria, and regional tourism, I think, is something that I will talk about till I'm blue in the face. And I think that anyone who starts to explore it will be amazed how awesome it is, and potentially have some life-changing patterns, start holidaying in Victoria rather than looking for the French Alps.
Yep, I can vouch for it. And with that, we might actually ask a couple of our regional members to ask a question. First on the line is Wendy Colleen. Wendy runs Stanton and Colleen Wineries up in beautiful, and I mean beautiful, Rutherglen. So you talked about wineries before. I'm sure Wendy's got a question about that. Wendy.
Minister Symes, just over a week ago, wineries were given the go-ahead to reopen for wine tastings at cellar doors, but with very different operating procedures than prior to COVID-19. Having spoken to other winery colleagues here in Rutherglen, and I have 19 winery colleagues, we are all glad to reopen and welcome back visitors, but the new normal operating restrictions are onerous, expensive and exhausting, and we are not allowed to charge for tastings to help cover our costs. Are the restrictions to be eased, and are we going to be able to charge for these more personalised services so we can wholeheartedly embrace and encourage visitation?
Yeah, thanks, Wendy. A really good question. And I do love Brother Glen, and thank you for your winemaking up there. I know you and your daughter are quite renowned for quality wine, and I know that the fortified wines up there are certainly one of my favourites, and I'm looking forward to coming back pretty soon. Look, it's been a challenging time for the hospitality sector and wineries in particular. We had to take the advice of the Chief Health Officer in relation to the easing of restrictions, and when it came to the cellar door experience, we had to separate it out from bars and clubs, which to you I know seems very obvious, but in a policy sense, when the health advice is that you shouldn't be able to go to a pub or a club and stand around mingling and drinking, then trying to make sure that didn't apply to a wine tasting experience was a conversation that we had to have, and I worked intensively with Wine Victoria on that. So we managed to enable wine tastings to occur. I acknowledge that it's not as they used to be. People have to be seated, and you can't charge for. The reason you can't charge is because otherwise it would be too difficult to provide the differentiation between bars and clubs. That was the rationale for that decision. You can serve tastings and wine with food and charge in that regard, but I understand that not all cellar doors have food offerings. Obviously, we're taking on board all of the feedback from businesses, and as the restrictions ease, I continually put forward what I'm hearing from industry, and I'll certainly be advocating for the wine industry. I know how important tastings are to their sales. And I know it's been difficult, but I have heard that a lot have done quite well this weekend, despite despite the restrictions and the onerous things that were placed on people. But look, Wine Victoria have been really good, and they'll continue to advocate for you guys to make sure that in future decisions your specific circumstances are considered.
Thanks, Minister. Thanks, Wendy. And we're going to head up or down the Murray as it is now and over to Neil Aird, who's the CEO of Business Wodonga.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Minister Symes. A lot of our businesses from all sectors, member businesses they are, said we need to focus on retail, hospitality and tourism and support those sectors in particular. We've started a few on-ground projects, and one is a digital plaza that we've developed with a local firm. I just wondered, what further plans or ideas does the Victorian Government have to support collaborative, practical approaches like the one I briefly mentioned there? And just wondering, how would the government like to work with Business Wodonga in further building on what we've started up here in Wodonga?
Well, I can answer the question first. Of course, I'd like to work with Business Wodonga to help and support the work you've been doing. I've been pretty impressed with a lot of the support local initiatives that are popping up all around the state, and I think consumers and locals have really responded to this, and I think it's a great thing. Not just now, but I think hopefully some behaviour changes will happen ongoing, and local producers and local businesses will be supported going forward in perpetuity. I've got regional partnerships, Victoria, which are having forums around the state to make sure that we're hearing on ground what different people's ideas are, what support they might need. I think it's really important, although we often talk about regional Victoria as an entity, I think the solutions are really different to different communities. What might work in Morwell is not going to necessarily work in Mildura, for example. So I think it's great that there's some organic things happening. I wouldn't want to come out with a policy of supporting locals across Victoria. I actually like the organic approach. We have been toying with some of the ideas within Regional Development Victoria about these types of initiatives, and although I don't have any particular sort of funding announcements and things to announce, Neil, I certainly can give you a commitment that this is something we're looking at closely. I want to work with locals to support what they're doing, and I think that as a collaboration we can do some pretty good things, and as I said, bring about some long-term change.
Brilliant. Thanks, Minister. Thanks, Neil. And Neil and the team up there have done a power of work with the local community. And I was lucky enough to sit through a couple of afternoons where they pulled together, the business groups, even the council were involved to talk through what's possible. And I know the ideas that Neil talked about were directly out of that. Wangaratta are about to have a similar one through Wangaratta Council, Chamber of Commerce as well. So it's fabulous to see all of these starting to grow through. And I've been watching the questions coming in, and they've been coming thick and fast. So I might hand over to Anne Wright, our head of PR and media, to ask a few. But as I do that, I noted that there was one message that said on Saturday, 27th of June, Sovereign Hill is going to open up. So I'm hoping that's true. And if it is, that is great news. But over to you, Ange.
It is true. There's been a media release sent out this morning, so we can confirm that's definitely true. We had two questions about gas exploration. Both Mark and Tom have asked about that. So Tom's question: with the passing of the Petroleum Legislation Amendment Bill last week and the imminent passing of the Constitutional Amendment Bill, and given that it is reported that there are extensive deposits of non-frackable gas onshore in Gippsland, will the government encourage investment in the assessment of these gas reserves with a view to their potential development and consequent uplift to employment in the Latrobe Valley and the security of Victoria's gas supplies?
Yep, thank you, Anne, and thank you, was it Tom, for the question in relation to gas. Just a little bit ahead of where we are, we actually have Parliament sitting next week, and the petroleum bill will be in the upper house and hopefully pass. It's a bill that I will take through as the responsible minister. But importantly, what it will do is facilitate the orderly restart of the onshore gas industry. We've had an extensive scientific and community process that has looked at the available gas and whether there are risks to community, agriculture and environment as a consequence of trying to extract that gas. And look, the evidence is clear. The onshore gas that is available in Victoria can be extracted safely. And importantly for regional Victoria, particularly right now, is what this means is securing energy supply for industry and homes, but creating many, many thousands of local jobs. So this is certainly an industry that has been on hold for many, many years, but the industry they're ready to go. When the bill passes the Parliament, there will be regulations and further consultation with community and the like for a restart for the end of June 21. But industry can start pretty much straight away once the legislation passes, ensuring all their desktop analyses and equipment orders and the like are all ready to go. So look, it's a controversial topic. I won't deny that. Gas I would argue is a transition fuel. We obviously have a commitment to increasing our renewable energy supply, and we have a target of net zero by 2050, but you can't just turn off the switch now. So we need to ensure that our homes, our businesses, our industries have got reliable power supply, and gas is certainly fits the bill in that regard. So very pleasing for industry and for regional Victoria and job creation that industry will commence in the not too distant future.
Thanks, Anne. We might have to leave it there given time. And Minister, as you're aware, we're very supportive of the decision that was taken a couple of weeks back. We think this is absolutely the right decision for business and very supportive of it. So thank you for taking the time to answer our questions. And I know there's a bunch there that we haven't been able to get to, but we'll work with your office to get those answered. And then we'll put them on our Victorian Chamber website, which is www.victorianchamber.com.au. You'll also be able to access business advice and, importantly, download today's webinar. So particularly those in regional Victoria that want to have a look again at what the Minister had to say, or perhaps share it, you can do that through that website. And also, there's been a number of questions around how do I access the government support. You can obviously do that through the Victorian Chamber or Vicky, or you can go to www.business.vic.gov.au for all of the support that the government has, and importantly, the grant applications there. Minister, appreciate your time again. It's been wonderful. We could have chatted all day, I'm sure.
Regional Victoria is certainly my favourite topic, Paul, so anytime.
Look forward to that. I hope everybody out there has found it interesting. I certainly have. And to formally close today's session, I'd like to ask Becky's Deputy President, ADRIAN KLOEDEN, to do that. Thanks, ADRIAN.
Thanks, Paul. It's my pleasure to thank Minister Jaclyn Symes for sharing her views and plans to bring regional Victoria back to economic strength after a period of drought, bushfires and the viral close down. I'm a participant in business in rural Victorian forestry sector in the northeast and the southwest and in Gippsland, and I see the support the Minister's bringing to that sector and also to agribusiness and other sectors. Of note, the agricultural workforce plan and access to funding. So I see that from my perspective. From the Chamber's perspective, we're here to advocate for our members, and this is a great opportunity today for our regional members to hear direct from the Minister and her thoughts for the sector. So as we come to the recovery phase, it's very timely today because we're lifting restrictions, and I think it's important that this particular regional flavour is brought to those lifting of those restrictions. And your optimism, Minister, on that issue is very welcome. You outlined a raft of ideas to rebuild the economy and help struggling businesses and communities. A few that I made a note of was the starting point adaptability of regional businesses in dealing with crises, commitment of your government, particularly the renaissance of domestic travel and the regional infrastructure fund, a whole lot of ideas in there and many more that you mentioned. So thanks for your valuable contribution today. Thanks to the busy Chamber team who bring us webinar after webinar on important subjects, and a special thanks to our members who joined us today. And we look forward to seeing our members at the webinar in the future. So thank you to all.
Thanks, ADRIAN. Thanks, Minister. Thanks, Wendy. Thanks, Neil. To everybody, have a great day.